Well, good afternoon and welcome to Action Coach Birmingham. I hope you're having a fantastic day. It's certainly lovely and hot and sunny. James and I were just talking about making sure we hydrate ourselves and drink lots of water. It's great to have James Bolle from Purposeful with us today. Hi, James. How are you?
Stephen, it's good to see you. Yeah, I'm hydrated, ready to go.
Good. It's great to have you back with us today. We're going to be talking a bit more about purpose again today and the next normal. And you'll need the power of purpose. We're going to be unpacking that a bit in today's Lunch and Learn webinar for the next 40 minutes or so. We are live on Facebook, LinkedIn, and on the Zoom platform. So whichever platform you're listening to us on, please do engage, ask any questions, connect with us. If you're finding it interesting, share, comment on the feed. And if you're listening to us afterwards and perhaps we're not live at that point, please do still ask any questions. Either James or myself will certainly reach out to you. Or if you're on YouTube, again, you'll have our contact details on the screen now. And at the end, please do make direct contact with us as well. So, James, great to have you with us. Tell us a bit about what you do at Purposeful.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. So I help leaders, mainly small business owners, but all leaders, to attract, engage, and motivate the right team members. And I do this by inspiring them to discover purpose for their business. And obviously I'll talk in the webinar a little bit about what purpose is. But when these businesses and their teams discover purpose, we find that they attract better people, engagement is higher, alignment is higher, productivity is higher, and these businesses just have better outcomes, and the people working there enjoy it more. So I like to think that I'm helping to improve society by helping people enjoy their jobs a little bit more by helping small businesses to do this.
Yes, and you and I, we've had a number of webinars over the last 6 months or so, haven't we? We've talked a lot about purpose, and people we're familiar with, perhaps Simon Sinek, is a well-known author, talks a lot about why and understanding your purpose. But just for the benefit of those who are with us this lunchtime, James, just to go back a bit and tell us a bit about, what is purpose?
Yeah, it's a good opening question, Stephen. And as you said, we've done whole webinars, whole 40 minutes on what purpose is. So I'll try and give you the succinct version. But purpose, essentially, lots of people do talk about Simon Sinek and his book Start With Why. And they say, purpose is the reason my business exists. It's my why. And that's great. That's a really helpful definition because in essence, it's true. But I try and define it just a little bit more tightly than that. Not because I think I own the definition of purpose or that I have a right to tell everyone what purpose is, but because I think by breaking it down a little further, it makes it more useful for people. People are able to activate it a little bit more easily. So when I'm talking about purpose, I talk about my four A's of purpose. So purpose is firstly, an authentically lived, that's number one, authentically lived call to action. Action is the second A, that is aspirational for an organization and its stakeholders, that advances someone or something outside of the organization itself. So those are the four A's. If you are authentically living something that is aspirational, drives action in your business, and if it succeeded, advances someone or something outside of your organization, then you've got a purpose. And of all these of these four A's, I think authenticity is the key one, and it's something that we talked about a lot in our prior webinars, making sure that you live that purpose. You don't just write it on the wall or talk a good game around it.
Absolutely, yeah. So no, really, I love the way you so give that really clear, tight definition, James. And we have talked about how organizations have authentically lived and need to authentically live that purpose. But yeah, so the four A's: authenticity, action, aspirational, and it advances something. And I think if our listeners take nothing away from today's, I'm sure they'll take a lot more away, but it's a really good thing just to remind ourselves those four A's, and great to understand what purpose is. So in terms of purpose, James, and we've talked a lot in the past about purpose, but when I've talked to my clients, a lot of them in the past have talked about when things go back to normal. And in our headline title today, it's the next normal. It's the new norm, isn't it? Which we are a phrase we're getting used to now, this new norm. Will we still need to have a clearly defined purpose? Do we need to redefine our purpose?
Yeah. So I'm not entirely comfortable with the phrase "the next normal." I know I came up with it and suggested it, but I think it's a little less cliched than the new normal. But yeah, I'm going to talk quite a lot.
Normal, James. That's the question, isn't it? It's
yeah, I'm going to
hold another webinar there.
No, I agree. I mean, and I'm going to talk a little bit about trust today. Basically, there are two types of people, it seems, from learning about trust. There are people who need evidence in order to trust others, and there are people who start with an inherent amount of trust and then you lose it over time. So I'm going to try and appeal to both sorts of people who are listening today. Firstly, by offering evidence of what I'm talking about, and secondly, by being open and honest and answering your questions as best I can. And we're going to see how kind of trust and purpose overlap, and how they're really important, I think, for business today and as we go forwards. Now, the question I sometimes get asked is purpose important? Like, is it not just another marketing fad? Is it something that's going to blow over in the same way that other fads have in the past? And I don't think it will. And the reason I don't think it will is because of research by people much cleverer than me, like the organization Contexis, which is an organization who measures purpose in organizations based on some Cambridge University research. And they have found in their research that 90 to 95% of people want to believe that the work that they do has some greater meaning than just making money. So 9 out of 10 people. You will always come across people in your team or in your family or in your friendship group who say, work's just about making money, isn't it? I get my meaning outside of work, and that's great, and that's true for them. But 90 to 95% of people surveyed in the UK want to get some kind of meaning from their work, and so it's important on that level, and that's backed up in.
That would be a lot higher, James, with small business owners generally. It's not just about the money. A lot of them, it's about a passion that they've gone into business having, and a purpose.
Absolutely. I mean, small business owners, again, I don't want to cover too much content that we covered on a prior webinar, but when you look at government surveys of why small business owners say they started their business, a lot of the reasons that those businesses have been started are things like, I want to be my own boss, I want to see more of my family, I thought I could make more money this way. These are all good personal motivations, and providing for your family is absolutely great. But of course, it doesn't quite meet the definition of purpose that I've already given, because it's not about advancing others. It's a little bit inward focused. And small business owners are amazing. They give up so much of their time. They give up money. They lose sleep in order to try and keep their businesses going. Often because they've got responsibilities, not just to their family, but to their employees or to their customers. They want to make the world a better place alongside all these other things. And that's the element that I think is really key for small business owners is, they are doing it. If they wanted to just make money, there are easier ways to do it than starting their own business normally. And yes, I would say probably 100% of business owners want to believe that their work has meaning, not just 90%. But it's certainly not just true of business owners and the teams that they're employing. I mean, Teresa Amabile, the researcher from Harvard, in her book, The Progress Principle, talks about, she ran 20,000 diary studies amongst 20,000 Americans. And what she found was what makes someone happy at the end of the day is that they feel like they've made progress on something that matters. That's why purpose is important, because it's key to making people happy day to day at work. In Drive by Dan Pink, which is a fantastic book if you've not read it, he talks about the 3 drivers of motivation being a feeling of autonomy, a feeling of mastery, and a feeling of purpose. Those are the 3 core things you need in order to be motivated. Purpose is key to people being happy at work and being motivated. And in that respect, it's important. And, when you get these things aligned in your business, you have greater success as a result, because purpose attracts people, it aligns them, guides their behavior day to day, and motivates them. They're more likely to stick at tasks that are difficult, and they work harder on tasks that are routine. Quoting Contexis again, they find that people working with a sense of purpose are twice as happy, connected, and committed and productive at work than people who work without a sense of purpose. So in that respect, I've always believed that purpose is important. And I won't go into my personal purpose journey, but purpose has always been important. But at the moment, I think it's even more important. And I think it's more important because of the relationship it has to trust and how we work with our organizations and some societal things that are going on as well. So, before I kind of launch into another monologue, I wondered if you had any questions about what I've just said.
So many organizations have gone through this quite significant period of change, haven't they? And in many different ways, whether it's a physical change, how they work, the people they're working with, maybe the actual business, the way it operates, or what it does. So now is a really important time to I guess to reassess what your purpose is, and to understand how you may need to adapt and adapt the business to meet the purpose rather than the purpose meet the business. Is that fair to say, James?
Yeah, I think so. I think that there are there are two big kind of societal things that we need to be aware of. And then there's one thing specifically related to what's going on today. So if I run through each of them, if that's okay. And
yeah, of course.
A source that I rely on quite a lot is the Edelman Trust Barometer, which is a survey that's been going for over 10 years now around the world, looking at how people trust in society. And in the 2021 edition, which is obviously conducted when we're months into the pandemic, 57% of respondents globally said that they think that governments purposely mislead people, which shows, so over half of the population of the world that was surveyed, obviously we can't say it perfectly represented the world population, but over half of those people surveyed don't trust governments to tell them the truth. They think they purposely mislead them. And trust in different information sources in this survey is at an all-time low. Whether you're getting your news from social media, from your friends, from the mainstream media, whatever, the level of trust in that information is lower than it has been since this survey started. And it points to, and actually amongst Republican voters in the US, unsurprisingly following the election results, which were disputed by Donald Trump, unsurprisingly, Republican voters in the US are particularly low on trust on information they receive from various sources at the moment. All of this points to a society that is beginning to lose trust in what it thinks it knows. But there is something within this survey that I think is really interesting, which is that in 18 of the 27 countries they worked in, the most trusted source of information and the most trusted institution is my employer. People still have a lot of faith in the businesses that they work for to tell them the truth and to do the right thing. And 2/3 of people surveyed said they think that their CEO in their organization should be taking the lead on societal issues. So we've got this societal trend where trust is declining, and people are looking to their companies to be sources of trust. Backing this up, then you've then got McKinsey research who are saying, like, as transaction costs and barriers to entry are at an historic low, it almost costs nothing to enter some markets now, and anybody can set up a business selling many services or retailing, whatever. What is the point of a company? The company, they think, organizations have changed focus from being a way to reduce transaction costs and be efficient to actually being a source of identity and belonging for people. So we've got low trust in institutions outside of work, and in lots of places, your work is the source that you trust, and you've got your work as a source of identity and belonging, and indeed the places you shop and the brands you buy. So you've got these two kind of societal things going on at once, which I think puts business right now in a uniquely opportunistic position to be that source of trust and that beacon of light for people. And, without sounding culty, an organization can almost be like a religion for some people now. They can truly believe, I'm a Gymshark person. I love Ben Francis. I'm going to buy Gymshark clothes. I'm going to wear Gymshark clothes everywhere. I'm going to tell my friends to do it. Gymshark speaks to me. I love Ben and his story. People buy into that wholeheartedly. And it's really important in that sense that people working at Gymshark and people buying at Gymshark can buy into what they're doing. Now, you've already referenced it, Stephen. We're at this crossroads, almost at a tipping point, where trust in society is going down. People want to trust in their employers. But, and I'm referring to some research now by a researcher called Tazal Neely from Harvard University. And she does a lot of research into trust at work. And she said that trust, the level of trust somebody has in their business, is closely related to what she, ironically enough, before the pandemic called social distance. She was saying that emotional connection is higher And there's a lot of evidence that emotional connection is built through physical connection, and that physical remoteness leads to an erosion of trust in an organization. There's lots of evidence for this. So trust in society is declining. People want to trust their organizations that they work for and want to believe in what they're doing. And it's a really important part of their identity, who they work for. But being distanced from other people in that company erodes their trust in the organization. And you know what? Almost everyone is working from home. So we've got this trust crisis. We've got this huge need for work to fill an identity gap in our lives. But we can't fully trust the organizations we're working for because we're not close to them, and we're not seeing the evidence that everyone's on the same page, that everyone's working together. And referring to Contexis again, workers who are home-based are feeling more isolated than ever. And it's creating, therefore, this kind of maelstrom of lack of trust in the organization. And I've heard countless stories that back this up. Now, they're only anecdotal. I've not seen widespread surveys on this, but there are, in some companies I know, huge tensions between those team members who are furloughed and those team members who kept the company going during the pandemic.
It's interesting.
One side saying, you don't know how hard it was keeping this company going without you here. And the other side saying, you don't know how hard it was being stuck at home with the kids all day. Nobody, people don't understand each other. And this is, therefore, the biggest challenge that any leader faces today is bridging the distance between the physical distance and the social distance between their employees, their team members, and bringing them together on the same page. That's the single biggest challenge that I think a leader faces as of today.
And we'll come back to the leader. It's interesting what you're saying, James. We've got two questions that have come in, or comments. One from Sarah saying she owns a pub, and she's really struggled to rebuild trust, having had to let staff go and put them on furlough to both recruit back into her business and to rebuild the team. And Joe was just commenting very much along the lines of what you said about starting a new role. He's obviously not got his own business, working for somebody else, trying to build up that relationship, working in a new organization when he's also working from home. So there are so many interesting dynamics out there, aren't there, at the moment?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think it is a uniquely difficult situation, but also it creates some opportunities. Now, you'll not be surprised, Steve, given the title of the session today, In the Next Normal, You'll Need the Power of Purpose. If, as a leader, you are trying to bridge that emotional distance between people, that social distance between people, I think purpose is one of the keys there to building that trust. Now, Contexis research has showed, I talked about this before, purpose is important. People who are people who work with a sense of purpose in an organization that they think actively works towards a purpose are more engaged, more connected. That effect is magnified multiple times amongst remote workers. And we're not entirely sure why. And reading the research and going back to the data and looking at it, it's not entirely clear why. But when they've researched the impact of purpose on how people feel about work, those people who are working from home are up to 3 times, those positive effects are up to 3 times stronger amongst remote workers than they are amongst people working in the office. So if you have a clear purpose and you're acting towards it, that is having a really strong impact on everyone in your business, but particularly the remote workers. So in this environment where you have people working remotely, they're looking for signals that they can trust you. Having this clear focus on purpose is a really effective and meaningful way to create that trust and build those bridges. It also works when people are in the office, but it's even stronger amongst remote workers. So if you are managing a workforce where people are working remotely and you are struggling to build trust amongst them, I would suggest now is the time to return to that purpose that you have, or to start looking at what that purpose is if you don't already have it defined.
It's a great opportunity for sort of that team realignment exercise, isn't it? Understanding, what individuals purpose and values are, and how you can exploit those almost to the use of the organization and bring people together.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, exploit always sounds like a negative
Sounds awful,
word.
doesn't it?
Like,
yes, yeah.
It does, but like, if you are the thing about purpose is if you are cynical about it and you try and use it as a tool, people see through it and it has no effect. But if you can genuinely work towards that purpose, people can buy into it, and it has a huge positive benefit for you. So while profit in and of itself isn't necessarily something you should chase through purpose, if you get purpose right, it tends to be delivered. And again, quoting some McKinsey research, they did some research on the organization of the future, and they identified 9 key things they think that organization has under 3 themes. And one of those themes was that the organization of the future knows who they are and what they stand for.
Mm.
And that is one of the 3 pillars of future business. And that's for all the reasons I talked about in terms of work becoming something of a place of belonging and identity for people, along with greater connectivity online and so on.
So just going back to Joel's point, James, in terms of into a new organization, any sort of practical sort of tips that he could put into practice, in terms of tapping in and trying to understand the purpose of that organization he's just joined?
Yeah, so I think there's one thing I'd say about trust, if that's okay, and then one thing I'd say about purpose. Yes. So the first thing about trust is, if you remember the joke I made at the beginning, or the point I made about there are 2 sorts of people. There are people who trust implicitly, and then they look for evidence that reduces that trust, or there are people who have low trust and you have to build it up. You have to obviously treat each type of person differently, but by giving trust, it tends to build trust back from others. So, sorry, was it Joel?
Joel, yes.
Yeah. Joel, if you're able to create situations where you're comfortable showing vulnerability to those around you, it typically will be reciprocated. If you are comfortable showing parts of yourself that don't necessarily paint you in the best light, then that can build trust. If you are searching for that element of purpose, I think the best way to do it is to talk to those around you. So I always think about the RNLI as an interesting organization, the Royal National Lifeboat Institute, because each of their job descriptions starts with the phrase, "I help to save lives at sea by ... And whether you're a cleaner, a volunteer, a lifeboat operator, somebody on the phones, a fundraiser, your job description says, "I help save lives at sea by ... If you can go back to your job description,
reminds me of the conversation we've had before.
Yeah, absolutely. If you can go back to your job description and layer your duties back up to something that you think improves the lives of others, then that's a way that you can find that purpose. But ask those around you. Ask them, what is the purpose of this organization? What difference are we trying to make in society? When we get this right, how do our customers and how does society benefit? And see what other people say. The sad truth is that if you get a lot of different answers, or you get a lot of people shrugging and saying, "Well, we don't really, it's all about the money," then the truth is you're going to have to find your own meaning in your work, rather than relying on an organizational purpose. But you should be able to get a sense of what's there. And if it's okay, Stephen, I'll come back to that question a little bit in a second, because I will talk about if you're a leader in an organization, how you can begin to discover that purpose for your organization. I think some of the questions from that section are also relevant for Joel to ask of his colleagues.
Perfect.
That's okay.
Yeah. No, that'd be great.
Yeah, brilliant. And so I think the other thing I would say about building trust is that, so again, I'm relying now on a researcher called Heidi K. Gardner, who is a part of the Harvard Law School. She talks about there being 2 sorts of trust. There's competence trust, which is the trust that other people are going to do what they say they're going to do, and they're going to do it well. And there's interpersonal trust, which is that you trust other people's intentions. Now, clearly, purpose is useful in helping to understand that everybody has good intentions, because if you can identify a purpose that advances some cause or constituency outside of the organization you work for, and people take action to work towards that, that is evidence of good intentions. And you can relate to it. Let's think if I'm working at Tesla, for example, Elon Musk is well documented as something of a tyrant within that organization, sending mad emails saying you must be working 70 hours a week or you're not a true value adder, and things like that. It's certainly been reported in the past. If he can then say, do you know what? The planet is dying and Tesla exists to accelerate the world's transition to renewable energy. The only reason why I'm so passionate about this business and want you to be passionate too is because we're facing a massive environmental crisis here, and we are the drivers of change within that. We are changing the planet. The intentions are become a lot clearer and can be a lot better understood. And in the pandemic and coming out of the pandemic, being able to point to, look, I know it's tough. I know getting on public transport and coming back into the office is going to be a grind for you. But this organization serves its customers or improves society best when we are collaborating face-to-face in the same space. That's why I'm asking you to do it. I know it's tough going on furlough or being kind of part-time furloughed. I'm trying to protect this organization because in 6 months' time, we're going to come out of the pandemic. The jobs are going to be back, hopefully. And we are going to be in a position to change people's lives, to connect people, to build people's self-esteem. If you can put the decisions you're making in the context of that purpose, then your intentions, sure, they can be questioned, but your intentions should be much clearer and should be much better understood. So purpose helps with that kind of interpersonal trust. It also helps with the competence trust, because if you are engaged in your work, you're more resilient, you're doing better work, the chances are you're going to do what you've said you were going to do, and you're going to do it well. So purpose helps with both sides of the trust equation. And it's even stronger when you're working from home. So being able to identify that purpose and look at how you impact on it, it just makes that a huge difference.
Yes, it links back to the first of those A's, isn't it? The authenticity, absolutely. And we were saying just before we started, that trust is, it's so easily lost by not being authentic or not living out, what you say you're going to do. And that's why, having that clear purpose and living out and seeing that purpose through is so important.
Yes, absolutely. So if you are managing a remote workforce, there's evidence purpose is more important. If you are managing a return to the office, I've seen lots of policies that friends of mine and other organizations have implemented or have had implemented on them, from everyone's in the office or everyone's out of the office, to we think you should be in the office 40% of the time. We don't care when you do it, but you have to be here 2 days a week, to we're going to just be completely laissez-faire. You work where you want, you work where best for you. Like, all of those approaches have drawbacks. I don't see a lot of organizations saying, here's our purpose statement and here are our values. As a team, let's work out what the best approach is to align to those values. It's not about the individual. It's not about having a rule. It's about figuring out what is the best way for us to live our values and to achieve our purpose. That is a truly open conversation where people's individual agendas can be made secondary to the overall benefit of ultimately what the business is about.
So I've got a question from Tracy. She's just asking, again, on a similar point, James, how do you avoid falling into the process trap versus purpose? You've just sort of alluded how organizations are at the moment. A lot of them are doing that in terms of return to work. They're focusing on that process. How can organizations avoid that, and what should they be doing?
Yeah, I'm not sure I 100% understand the question, the process trap.
I think she's alluding to, as you were just saying, focusing on the process. So are you in work? Are you not in work? Looking at the, process of return to work, rather than, as you've just said, looking at the purpose. What is it we're trying to achieve here, and how can we align ourselves to that? So many people's instinctive response, many leaders or managers' instinctive response is to look at the process. This is how we do things, etc., rather than looking at the purpose.
Yes. Okay, I think I understand.
Yeah. I mean, again, it may be a longer answer than we've got time for. I don't know.
No. I mean, I like a process. So I struggle with that. And I can see, particularly in larger organizations, it is easier to write a process than
Yes.
to figure that answer out.
Yes,
I'm fine with following a process as long as it's clear that it's in support of something else rather than just a process for its own sake. You know, I'm writing this process because it's easier for me to manage you, or I'm writing this process because we've gone through the thinking of, you know, how we're going to best pursue our purpose, and we've agreed that this is the way to go. And the process gives you guardrails and guidelines on how to work within it. I think the process in that case is actually okay.
Brilliant. So let's talk a bit about how leaders can assess if they have purpose.
Yeah. I mean, so the questions that I typically get asked in this, so I've been passionately talking about purpose for years, from how it can aid customer experience through to how it can help you retain your star team members. And a question that I often get asked is, okay, well, I think I've got purpose, or I'm not sure if I've got purpose. How do I figure that out? And the first thing I would do is, if you are, whoever you are in the organization, write down what you think the purpose of that organization is, and just assess it versus those 4 A's. And the key one of those is the authenticity.
Yeah.
So I was talking to somebody who worked for PwC, who say their purpose is to build trust in society and solve important problems. So we talked about, okay, well, let's start with authenticity. Is there any evidence? Can you find evidence of actions being taken that support or go against that purpose? And we had a really interesting session finding lists on both sides, but actually there's quite a long list of things that organization had done, decisions that they were making that she thought were evidence that they weren't living that purpose. Now, I mean, I talk at a macro level about, their auditing arm not being split out from their advisory arm. I think that massively goes against building trust in society. But if you can sit down and say, okay, well, let's look at the decisions I've made or that the company has made that support this purpose or otherwise, that's a really good place to start. Because if you can find lots of evidence of a purpose not being followed, then you probably don't have it. Equally, if you find it hard to write down, you probably don't have it, because you'll be aware of it. The next thing I would do, if you ask yourself, what's the purpose of the organization I work for, and you can write down an answer, and you think you're pretty much on track in terms of actions being taken to support that, ask those around you. And this is where I think I go back to Joel's point. Ask other people in the organization, what is this organization for? Why do we exist? How do we make people's lives better? And compare the answers. If what you might find, I found in organizations, is a really siloed approach to this, where one part of the organization says, well, the purpose of this organization is to do the job that I do. And the next department says, well, the purpose of this organization is to do the job that I do. Clearly, they're not aligned around a higher purpose. But if people can talk about, for example, connecting people and building their self-esteem, or enabling others to thrive, or tackling the environmental crisis, or whatever it might be, then there probably is a purpose under there somewhere, and the opportunity to build purpose-rich working lives. And if you go through that process, you find that it's not clear, or you don't think you have it, this is what Simon Sinek suggests you do, and it's part of the process that I use. Ask those around you what makes them proud to work for the organization. What makes you proud to work for this organization? And be specific, right? It's no use saying, customers are happy when they work with us, or I like it when we get thanks from a user. Think about specific examples of things that have made you proud. And within that, think about what contribution has your organization made and what impact that has had. And it's in there that the purpose exists. So Joel, it's a really nice question to ask, some peers, line manager, or your team members, depending what position you're in. Tell me about times when you've been proud to work for this organization. Actually, just going through that exercise of talking about things that have made them proud will probably make them feel better about work. But within those stories, you'll begin to find themes. Do you know what? in this story, our contribution was always to build people's self-esteem, to help people see the future better, to live more independently, whatever it might be, in order that they could contribute more to society, live their best lives, whatever it might be. And that's a really nice question to ask, a really nice exercise to do. And it makes a great team session, or a great team away day, or half day, whatever you want to do. If you start talking about those stories of pride and identify your contribution within them, not only have you got a chance of finding some authentic values and a purpose statement, you're going to have fun doing it and engage people doing it.
And James, I can think of organizations I've worked for, volunteered for, charities that have struggled to, as they come out of the lockdown, have really struggled to sort of redefine their purpose going forwards. How can an organization start to find purpose, or start to find their purpose going forwards, or rediscover it, dare I say?
Well, I mean, I think I would bring everyone together and do the exercise that I just discussed. And I would embrace the challenges that the pandemic has raised. When I say bring everyone together, I mean figuratively. I don't mean they necessarily have to all physically be in the same space, because I know that's a challenge. But if you bring people together and talk about those stories of pride and embrace the changes you had to make in the pandemic and the specific impact you made during the pandemic. I've told this story before, I don't think on one of our webinars, of a manufacturing business in Birmingham, whose team refused to come back into the plant and start manufacturing unless the organization would devote part of its production line to making PPE. And they could be really proud of that. Not necessarily the PPE, that is actually slightly irrelevant, but the fact that we pulled together behind the same goal, we were determined to do something for the public good, that can help you, deep diving into the way that you reacted to that situation and evolved and adapted can really tell you what it is that's true about your company, what the emotional heart is. And you can begin to put that around your operations going forward. And it's like, and, then if you're okay with that, Stephen, I've got a few kind of hints and tips on how you can bring that to life. Because if you can identify that emotional core, there are some simple things you can do to begin living it without ripping up your business plan, without completely starting again, that can really change the way people feel about work.
No, that'd be great. Yeah, please carry on. Carry on, James.
Yeah, I mean, for me, and again, Contextus research backs this up, purpose, if it's just words, is meaningless. But if you can identify that people are acting congruently with that purpose, then it matters. If your purpose is what you intend, if you can show that you're acting in line with it, and then you say what you say about your business is congruent with that, it's really powerful. So here are some simple things you can do to try and make people act in line with that. And the first thing is think about what you measure. So I've done a lot of work in the last couple of years, strangely, with recruitment consultancies or recruitment agencies. I think it's because, the success of their business is based on the service delivered by their people. So it makes sense that I would be called in to help them figure out purpose. But it's no good saying that we are a business that exists to create opportunities for people so that they can live their best lives if all you measure is what the sales pipeline looks like. You also need to have some sense of how many people you're helping, how their lives are better. Like, are you going back to your candidates 6 months later and seeing, are they actually happier in their new jobs than they were when you started? Have you placed them well? You need to have some measure beyond just sales to understand that you're doing it right. And then that relates to, if you can define specific observable behaviors that say, if we're doing these behaviors, then we're probably living our values or our purpose, and then catch people doing them right. So Amazon is not necessarily the most purpose-led company in the world, not the most positively thought of company because of how it treats its team members and so on. But by saying we need to have an empty chair in every meeting we have, and we have to imagine that the customer is in that empty chair, there is a specific observable behavior that everyone can buy into that can remind them of the purpose of that organization. By saying, by having a rule, again, Amazon, if your team is too large to feed with 2 large pizzas, then the team's too big and you need to split it up. there are specific observable things you can do. So think about within your organization, what is that specific observable behavior? If we exist to build people's self-esteem, okay, maybe we should start every weekly roundup meeting by giving each other compliments. That's a specific observable behavior we can do that reflects the difference we want to make in the world internally. So you've got what you measure and you've got specific observable behaviors. And then there's a lot of research that shows that actually just finding time to reflect on your purpose helps to embed it. So take within your team half an hour a month, half an hour a week, an hour a quarter, whatever you think is appropriate. But set that time aside as structured, scheduled reflection time to think about, okay, how have we made progress towards our purpose in the last period? Just stopping and reflecting on that purpose makes people act more purpose-led in a more purpose-led way and increases their engagement. And that's based on research again from McKinsey. So there's 3 really simple things you can do straight away. There are slightly more complex ones. I realize I've already been talking for 40 minutes, Stephen. So I don't know if you want a few more tips, or should we go to Q&A?
I have got another question actually from Claire, who's just asked, does the team all have to buy into the same purpose for the team to be successful? It's an interesting one. I know we've talked a bit about purpose and teams in previous webinars. James, is that something you can touch on briefly?
So I think if everybody in the team subjugates themselves to the purpose, then it's not a team, it's a cult. I think it's really healthy for everybody. I've done a slide on it in a previous presentation. Like, imagine you are planets in orbit around a sun in the solar system, or a solar system. Purpose is the sun, and it's that gravity that keeps you in orbit. If you're all on exactly the same orbit, then you crash into each other. If you're 100%, if you're too close to the sun, then you get sucked into it and you get destroyed. You don't exist as an individual anymore. We want people to be their whole selves at work. We want people to feel that they can bring their authentic selves to work. So we want the purpose to act as that kind of sun that keeps everybody in orbit around it, but it doesn't have to be the same orbit, and we certainly don't want them to be too close. So what I would look for is once you've defined that organizational purpose, encourage people to find their way to contribute to it. And it's the way that they contribute that will typically then bring them out. Some people love helping others and seeing others succeed. Some people love doing fantastic work. Some people love achieving. Enable people to find their own contribution within that purpose. And there's lots of evidence that 2 simple things really help to engage people in work and really help them to see that they're engaged in the purpose. One is really simple, which is allowing people to write their own job titles, which sounds stupid. And actually, you could still have your job title a project manager, account manager, operations director, whatever you want internally. But just allowing people to think about the difference they make in the organization and write their own job title helps them focus on that purpose and helps them see individually they make a contribution to it. And then taking that further, you can also allow them to begin to craft their own job description based on the activities they do. And think about the RNLI example again. Think about how they personally contribute. And so it's having the organizational purpose and then enabling people to see their personal contribution that I think makes the biggest. So yes, you can thrive, and I think you will thrive more if a team members have slightly different personal takes on how they contribute to that purpose and why it's important. I don't think everybody should have exactly the same point of view, because that way you just get groupthink and you don't get new ideas and innovation. And
yes, it stifles that creativity, doesn't it? You've just given me flashbacks as well, James, to a time when I worked in public sector many years ago and was restructuring my team, and had the team to help, as you've just suggested, help them to create their own job descriptions, get them to think about what their purpose and what I didn't think of it in the same way at the time, but helping them to create those job descriptions. It wasn't necessarily the final say, but the engagement levels were went through the roof in terms of people's sort of enthusiasm. You can imagine a restructure of any kind is obviously quite a difficult time, but yeah, just really engaged them with a clearer sense of purpose, I think, certainly.
Yeah, it's a great example. I mean, I think there are self-management self-managing organizations, it's a holacracy is the term if you want to Google it. That is the ultimate extreme of that, which is everybody writes their own job description and how it contributes to the organization, and there are no managers, and that's a bit wacky for some people, but it really works in a purpose-led context as well.
Yeah, so you can imagine public sector, we didn't quite go to that extreme, but it was a great way to engage. Great way to engage.
Well, to be fair, there aren't many organizations privately that go to that extreme either, but Zappos is one, and it's a good example.
Yeah. You talked earlier on about reflecting on purpose on a regular basis. Joe was just saying, are the 4 A's a useful structure to be able to reflect on purpose? Is that something you would advocate doing?
Not necessarily. I think that's useful for a kind of purpose definition. When it's the authenticity A and the action A that are really important here. So if we've got a purpose that fulfills those criteria, the period of reflection is, okay, so how have I then made progress on this, or made a contribution to this in the last week, for example? So I always talk about the purpose of purposeful being to inspire people to discover purpose so they can love work and lead more fulfilling lives. So I might sit down at the end of the week and reflect not on whether that is aspirational enough or is going to advance others, because I kind of take that as a given, but I'm going to say, well, how many people did I speak to on webinars this week? How many people downloaded my podcast this week? How many visitors have I had at the website? Okay, well, if we assume I've made a positive impact on them, then I've done a good job. And even if I've just changed 5 hearts and minds, that's a good week's work. What tasks have I done, and how have they helped me contribute towards that purpose? Okay, yeah, it's great. I worked with this startup business, and I'm helping them discover their purpose. So there's a clear difference there. That organization has an aspiration to have 20 staff in 8 years' time. So there's 20 people potentially affected there. So I don't think I'd use the A's. I think I would, that's the definition for the purpose. I would just sit down and try and find evidence of ways that I've helped to deliver that purpose.
Great. And one last question. We're getting back to Joel. He asked one of the first questions. So Joel just asked one last question. When reflecting on purpose, should it be I or we? It's quite a simple question, but I don't know if it's a straightforward answer.
Well, actually, I had an ex-boss who talked about in an organization he'd worked for where they banned the word I, and literally this was back in the early days of email, and before you sent an email, your boss would have to check it, and they would take out all mentions of I and replace it with we. But each individual in an organization has to know that they are making progress on something that matters. Ultimately, I can't win if you lose. So ultimately, we stand or fall as a team. But am I going to go home and be as satisfied if I can't identify anything that I personally have done to contribute? So that I would not ban the word I would look at, in personal reflection, what I have done, and then maybe look separately at what we have done as a team. I guess it'll be my last anecdote, and I read about it in the book The Culture Code by Dan Coyle, which is another one I'd recommend. But at Wipro, they did an onboarding trial where they had 3 groups of people. One group of people just being onboarded the normal way. Second group of people being onboarded plus with talks about how they can impact the customer. And the third group of people focused a bit more on them. And the difference between those last 2 groups was, at the end of the training, the people in the third group were asked to just think at the end of the session about how they would use their unique personal gifts to contribute to the organization. And then they were given a T-shirt that had their own name on it, rather than that just said Wipro. And that last team were more likely to still be there a year later. Their sales performance had been better over the course of that year. They were more engaged. So it's not just about knowing what the organization is about. Obviously, you need that to be engaged, but it's also about knowing how your unique skills contribute to it. So, yeah, I think it's okay to think about I.
Brilliant. That sounds like a really good place to to bring things to an end, James, it's been great having you with us today. Really do appreciate you taking time out. Just for those who are perhaps on the first webinar with yourself and I, James, do you just want to tell me a bit about what you do at Purposeful in terms of how that next step, if somebody's interested in having that conversation with you, the best way to contact you, what what the next steps might look like?
Yeah, what I'd love you to do if you want to have a conversation is connect with me on LinkedIn, or you can get access straight to my diary on the link that's on the screen. If you go to purposeful.as.me, then you can see a direct link into my diary and just book a time to chat. I personally, I see my role here to help people discover purpose and be inspired by it. I always say my personal purpose is to turn on the light so others can find their way. I'm not a salesperson. If you get in touch with me and call with me, I'm not going to hassle you hundreds of times to try and sell you something. I'm going to have a conversation with you, listen to you, and figure out where you are on your purpose journey and try and help you. So yeah, please do connect with me on LinkedIn or book a call with me or email me, james@purposefulprpsfl.com, and let's start a conversation. And together we can, I'm really inspired. I'd like to think that I can make Birmingham and the West Midlands the purpose capital of the world and have happier, more productive population than anywhere else. But join me on that journey if that's something that sounds good.
Great. Well, that's a brilliant place to end, and I hope that by being with us today, James, we've taken you a step further, and we've all helped each other to be a step further forward in terms of that ambition of capital, Birmingham being the capital for purpose and understanding our purpose. So I really do appreciate you being with us today. As I said at the beginning, if you're listening to this in delay or later on in the evening, please do reach out to either James or myself. Contact details on the screen, you can see them there, and we'd love to have that conversation with you. It's a great offer from James there, just to have an initial conversation. As he said, he's not a salesperson, he just wants to help you and your organization discover their purpose, and I'm sure there'll be ways in which you can work together. That'd be great for you and for James. So James, thank you very much. It's been great having you with us. It's good to see you again. I'm glad you're keeping well and safe, and we look forward to you coming back again at some point in the future. Enjoy the summer. I don't know whether when we'll be back together, but I'm sure we will be meeting up soon. But enjoy the summer months, enjoy the sunshine today, and we look forward to connecting with you again very soon. And thanks to all our listeners for taking time out of your lunch today. I hope and I'm confident you found it useful, and we look forward to having those further conversations. But for now, stay well and stay safe. Take care now. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.